We're tracking several major stories at this hour, starting with a new migrant caravan of over 5,000 that's headed directly for our southern border. I wonder who's in that caravan. This is we're learning that over 600,000 people evaded law enforcement before crossing the border last year. And get this, we have no knowledge of who they are or where they went or their affiliations. Plus, FBI Director Christopher Wray says the threat of a terror attack on U.S. soil is at a whole other level. He's warning that Hamas's actions will inspire the greatest U.S. terror threat since ISIS. But first, we begin with the White House's refusal to classify violent anti-Semitic threats as domestic terrorism. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany, here with my co-host Emily Campagno and Harris Faulkner. Also joining us, Restoring America editor for the Washington Examiner and senior fellow for the Independent Women's Forum, Kaylee McGee-White, and former Biden campaign surrogate, Kevin Walling. Now, the White House is being accused of hypocrisy when it comes to hatred. You should be able to call hate, hate, anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism. Remember, the Biden administration directed the FBI to investigate concerned parents, after they protested about pornography at the school board meetings in front of their young children. And they had no problem targeting Catholics either. Remember that FBI memo from last year warning that radical traditional Catholics, never heard of those, could be, quote, violent extremists. And remember pro-life Catholic Mark Houck, just a father, an innocent father. The FBI treated him like a domestic terrorist. They arrested him at gunpoint, FBI agents, in his front yard in front of his screaming children for defending his son against a Planned Parenthood volunteer. Thankfully, we still have juries in this country, and he was found innocent. But when it comes to those making violent threats against Jews during a worldwide surge in anti-Semitism, the White House won't call them domestic terrorists.
The people in this country making violent anti-Semitic threats, are they domestic terrorists?
I don't know that we're classifying people as domestic terrorists for that. I mean, that's really a question better left to law enforcement. I'm not aware that there's been such a characterization of that.
So, not domestic terrorists. Well, let's try extremist.
Does President Biden think the anti-Israel protesters in this country are extremists?
What I can say is what we've been very clear about this. When it comes to anti-Semitism, there is no place. We have to make sure that we speak against it very loud and be very clear about that.
What about these protesters who are making Jewish
I've
students feel
very,
unsafe
very clear
on college campuses? Are they extremists?
I've been very, very clear. We are calling out any form of hate. Any form of hate. It is not acceptable. It should not be acceptable here. And we are going to continue to call that out.
You know, I just don't get it. Kevin, the DOJ has arrested a student who published a threat to stab and slit the throat of any Jewish males he sees on campus, and to rape and throw off a cliff any Jewish females, and to behead any Jewish babies. That seems like an extremist to me. And a domestic terrorist.
It's 100% an extremist, 100% a domestic terrorist. He should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, the student at Cornell University. You know, Harris, on the Faulkner Focus, you played some of Director Wray's testimony yesterday before Congress. You know, Jews represent just about 2.5% of Americans in this country, but are faced with 60% of the violent extremism, the threats.
But why won't the White House say it?
Well, they should.
They should.
And the president has been, I think, very clear when he was in Israel on that trip. And since then, before multiple audiences condemning this anti-Semitism, we need to call it out as extremism. The fact that threats are up 400% against Jewish Americans is intolerable. It's disgusting. It's not who we are as Americans. And we need to call it what it is.
You know, Harris, there's a gut reaction with this DOJ. Go after the parent, go after the Catholic, go after the pro-lifer. Where is the gut reaction from the White House to call the anti-Semitic extremism what it is, extremism?
Well, right now they're caught between the 2.5% of Jewish Americans and about 2% Muslim voters. That's where they're caught. And I don't know why they feel like they can't do both, why they can't say to both sides, look, you guys are saying that you're with the terrorists. If you want to change your message, you can change your message. But in the meantime, America always stands with Israel. And I go back to you on this.
And with Jewish Americans, too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Exactly. So I come back to you on this because I'm really curious. Are you as frustrated as the rest of us when we watch from the White House podium preach to daily about Islamophobia is equal to what's happening in Israel right now? They're two separate things. You can treat them equally or differently, but they are not interchangeable. Are you frustrated at all? I know when I watch, I don't understand why she can't simply answer the question that we are talking about right now, and that is, this is domestic terrorism. And if they come here and attack us on the soil, that's what it's going to be.
You're absolutely right. Listen, we need to call a spade in terms of what this is. The president has been very clear. I think, what we need to see is more moral clarity coming out of the White House in terms of their spokespeople on this issue. I think you're going to see it. And you saw the press secretary very well come back.
When it's coming up?
And, she clarified her remarks earlier because they fell short.
But that
and we
should have
sometimes
been a
get this wrong.
That should have been a visceral reaction. We had Congressman Moskowitz on.
Absolutely.
To underscore that. You shouldn't have to turn to the tab in your binder. You should be able to do that on command as a gut reaction, and she wasn't. Here's the State Department spokesperson, though, asked about an anti-Semitic employee being paid for with your taxpayer dollars.
One more question, if you don't mind. Senator Chuck Grassley has written to the secretary a few times about Fritz Berggren, a State Department employee, accusing him of maintaining a publicly available blog that includes a lot of anti-Semitic content. He called the Jewish people the devil's children recently. So your state has confirmed to us that he is still an employee. Has he faced any disciplinary action?
So because of privacy restrictions that apply to every federal employee, I'm unable to talk about any individual employee's employment file and employment status here at the State Department. I will say, of course, as a general rule, we oppose anti-Semitism in any form.
Insufficient, Matt Miller. Look at this, Emily. He can't tell us what's happening with their taxpayer dollars. But this employee has been issuing anti-Semitic remarks for a long time. Take a look at this letter. This is from Charles Grassley, Senator Grassley. Take a look at the date, July 14th. It's November 1st, July 14th. Grassley said, based on reports, the State Department still employs Fritz Berggren as a Foreign Service officer. And at one time, he was reportedly assigned to a unit that handles special immigrant visas for Afghans. He was demanding answers back in the summer.
And unfortunately, it seems that the answers are still opaque when the solution is so clear. First of all, I understand this employee is on administrative leave, which we are still paying for, which means they're enjoying watching TV at home. They are enjoying the likely fruits of their nefarious labor. I'd like to point out, in addition to all of those examples you laid out, Kaylee, how our president has articulated where his priorities are. So do we recall back in January of 2021, when he was first sworn in at the swearing-in ceremony for his employees, he told everyone, he told the world, I will fire you on the spot, he said to his employees if they showed any form of, quote, disrespect. He said apparently he has a, quote, zero tolerance for firearms dealers. That was in June of 2021, if any of them go what he called rogue. In March, he called Governor DeSantis' legislation that was protecting parental rights, quote, close to sinful. And just 11 hours ago, we learned from the White House that they are creating a national strategy to combat, wait for it, Islamophobia. That is where their priorities are. That is where their attention is. And if he can be so clear, so quick to fire someone on the spot for disrespect, and yet blatant, atrocious, unacceptable, hateful anti-Semitism, so clear here, there's just silence. There's an unwillingness to condemn. It is shameful. I expect nothing less from this administration.
It is shameful. And I believe the employee that's on administrative leave is another employee at DHS. There are two. Ugh, there are two.
At least two.
And this one seemed to celebrate the October 7th attack with a picture of a paraglider. There are two taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, and I want to touch on something that Kevin said, where he was asking why the administration is unable to provide moral clarity. And the fact is they're not able to provide moral clarity because they've spent the past 2 years deliberately blurring the lines and foaming out the mouth over things that do not matter, if you have someone like Ilhan Omar calling Jim Jordan a terrorist, if you have the FBI smearing faithful Catholics as potential extremists, if you have the FBI smearing concerned parents as potential domestic terrorists, you have lost the ability to define what is right and what is wrong. And that's why we're not getting any moral clarity from the White House.
Yeah, and if moral clarity is really coming from the top, get the Biden spokespeople in the room from all departments, have a talk with them, get better answers.